In this video, I will be sharing how to host a meeting on Zoom. You'll first need to set up an account, which there are lots of options, and you can choose what fits your caseload or the needs of your students or your school. And for me, I was able to get a free teacher account because Zoom was allowing teachers using a school email address to set up and use Zoom for free. I don't know that that will last for a long period of time. Obviously, we're all kind of in limbo with digital learning, but it's definitely something to check into. Once you've created your account, you can click My Account. And there are three options here, and I'm going to kind of just walk through each of those so you know why you would use one over the other. In the middle, we have Join a Meeting, which when I click, I can enter a meeting ID, which I'll show you how to get that later. If you are one hosting, you're going to need to share a meeting ID. If you are attending a meeting that somebody else has set up, you'll enter the meeting ID here. If you're not joining a meeting, but you are actually the one hosting, then you have two different options. You can schedule it in advance, or hosting a meeting is more kind of on the fly. Like, I am not clicking these buttons because then it's going to pop up on my screen right now to hold that meeting. So if I just hover over Host a Meeting, I can choose to have a meeting with the video off, the video on, or if I only want to share my screen. So some examples of this would be just like if you were going to hold a conference call with several teachers or a parent, whatever the case may be, it would just be audio only. This, even though it says video on, don't feel like if somebody has bedhead early in the morning for a meeting that you're going to have to look at it. They can shut their camera off, but you are giving them the ability to make that choice instead of it's only off or only on. So don't feel like if you say video on, every participant is going to have their camera on. They can still choose to shut it off. And screen share only, in my mind, is what I think of if I were watching a PD with a webinar or something where the presenter is sharing a PowerPoint presentation. I don't need to look at the faces of all of the participants. I really only care about seeing the presenter screen. So maybe depending on what your needs are, you might use each of those at different times. And remember, these are kind of on the fly. Maybe you were talking on the phone with one fellow teacher and you say, hey, we kind of need to talk about this as a team. Let me start a Zoom meeting. And then you do that right away. If you are going to schedule a meeting, which in my mind is what we will likely use the most as special education teachers, we're probably going to be scheduling a lot of meetings. So in my mind, this will either be used for annual case reviews or maybe evaluation conferences, things like that, your traditional case conference. Or you might also be using it for small group meetings that are going to meet on a regular basis. So I'm going to show you two different ways in which you might schedule a meeting. So for me, I might set up an annual case conference. I would set the date and the time. I'd tell approximately how long that's going to be. And with this, don't quote me on this, but I believe free accounts have a limit to the duration of your meeting. So if it was going to be a really intense annual case conference and you have a free account that has maybe only 30 to 45 minutes, you would probably not want to be choosing to use a free account. But if you can get it done in under an hour or whatever that cutoff is, I'm not sure, then a free account would likely be fitting for you. If we scroll down, there are also some options that I want to talk about or share just so that you understand what you would be choosing or not choosing. The first is video. As a host, do you want your camera on or off? Again, if you say on, that doesn't mean you can't switch it off. If you have to readjust something or walk away for a minute, you can still shut it off. But if this isn't checked, you don't even have the option to use video. And same for your participants. Do you want them to have the option or do you just want it off? Maybe depending on what you're doing with your students, you don't want them seeing one another. That really is up to you. Additional options would be enabling them to join before you. So maybe depending on the age of your students, you may not want 4th or 5th graders just sitting there hanging out or middle schoolers just sitting there chatting before the teacher's there. So you might want to enable or allow them to join before the host, or maybe not. Do you want to mute people when they enter? So if you had 50 or more people, or even 20 to 30 people entering a meeting all at once, you might want them to be muted when they come in. They could unmute themselves later if they have to talk or present or share, but 20 or 30 people coming into a meeting at once is going to be pretty noisy. Kindergartners entering might be kind of noisy, but at the same time, then you have to teach them to unmute themselves. So that's something, depending on the ability or the age of your students, might determine if you want them muted or not. There's also the ability to have a waiting room, and for me, I've joined Zoom meetings before where I'm in a waiting room and it just says we're waiting on the host. And with that, I don't know if this is true, but apparently other people, like weird, creepy internet people, have joined waiting rooms and then are able to talk to children just waiting on their teacher. So I don't know if there is any truth to that at all, but I have unchecked it just to be safe. I would rather be safe than sorry. And the last option is for Zoom to automatically record it and save it onto your computer. For me, this would be useful if I were doing a small group and some of my kids were joining live, but maybe others don't have internet access until a later date or time in that particular day, or some of my students are able to join, but I need proof that I am working or recording or sharing that information with other people. I would forget to record it myself, but if it were automatically doing it and saving it for me, then I could upload it at a later time. I'm going to come back up here and show you if I were to hold a small group from 9 o'clock to 9:30 daily. I could title this 9 to 9:30 small reading group, and maybe 1 hour. Let's see, I could just do 30 minutes and tell whatever time that meeting is going to occur each day. And I can check reoccurring meeting, or that it's going to be recurring. And I can tell how often. Is it going to be daily, weekly, monthly? Is it going to repeat every day, every 2 days, every 3 days? How often is it going to be repeating? And I can even give it an end date. So if I knew that e-learning was going to be done at a certain time and we'd be going back to school or be going for a break, I could give it an end date. And really, it works the same way regardless of how you choose recurring or not. But if you do it as recurring, you don't have to schedule the meeting each and every day. Students would just be able to enter through the same link each and every time. Then when we hit save, we're going to come to the next box. We can add, or to the next screen where we can add this to our Google Calendar, our Outlook calendar, or our Yahoo calendar. And you can also copy and paste this invitation, which I will show you in a later video how to get this to your students. But this is what participants or people coming to your meeting will need. Remember earlier I told you there was a meeting ID that people could type in? I think that's a little challenging, and I have actually had more errors, or I don't know if I've ever had a successful experience entering the meeting ID. I prefer to have a hyperlink where I can click this. So if I could email this to students or teachers or parents, if I could share this in Google Classroom, it's much easier to click a link, and I have not had great success with this, but that could be user error at the same time. I don't know, but being able to share this link has been extremely valuable for me.